Why are you here, Clarice?
Clarice stared with scorn at her principal sitting across from her. Clarice knew why she wasn't in the principal's office at Township Middle School on a Tuesday afternoon.
I shouldn't be here, Miss Watkins. What Mr. Thompson overheard me say to Taylor wasn't bad. It wasn't a big deal. Taylor didn't even say anything back to me.
What exactly did you say to Taylor, Clarice? I'm sure Mr. Thompson had a good reason to request
All I
that
did
I
was
talk
tell
to you.
Taylor how to fix his clothes and how he should fix his handwriting so that he could look more like a boy. I told him I don't want to sit next to a boy that acts like a girl all the time. If I wanted to be with girls, I would sit by real girls. Taylor didn't say anything to me. He just sat there. I don't understand what I did wrong.
Miss Watkins raised her eyebrows in surprise. Not in response to what Clarice had said, but at the fact that Mr. Thompson had sent her to the office at all. Mr. Thompson continually sends kids to the office for minor teasing.
You didn't do anything wrong, Clarice. If Taylor wants to dress weirdly and act differently, then he should expect to be treated differently.
Miss Watkins told Clarice to go ahead and head home for the day. Clarice left Miss Watkins' office relieved. She didn't feel bad at all for what she had said, and didn't feel she had done anything wrong, and her own principal had reassured her of that. That night, Clarice went to bed nervous because at dinner, her parents had told her that if she got sent to the principal's office again tomorrow, she would be grounded for a week. Clarice fell asleep anyway and began to dream about different colors, places, and people. In her first dream, an unfamiliar figure appeared before her.
Good evening, Clarice.
Who are you?
Clarice asked.
I'm your fairy transparent. Come with me, I have much to show you.
The words were seared into his mind.
Some whole people maim themselves and amputate limbs because they feel like that's who they are. Some people want to be dogs or cats or anything but human. Some white people want to be black. How are you any different from them? How is your disorder anything different?
Sam had hoped that the memory of his pastor's words would fade as he got further and further away from the church, but each bump of the bus seemed to make them more vivid. Before he knew it, tears had welled up in his eyes, and the couple in the next seat had begun to stare. Sam went to the bus lavatory, locked himself in, and began to cry. It wasn't until he emerged a short time later and was closing the door that Sam realized the sign on it said, "Unisex." Somehow, this seemed like a cloud had been lifted. It comforted Sam, and he chuckled to himself, struck by the idea that the one place where he could go to the bathroom without stares or judgment was in the cramped closet in the back of a dirty Greyhound. I guess I'm in transit, he thought, and almost laughed out loud. He smiled at the couple across from him as he returned to the seat. By the time the bus had arrived in the city, Sam's tears had dried, and he once again felt the nervous anxiety that comes with great expectations. He had rejoiced when he heard about the clinic, run by a doctor who was some sort of expert on the transgendered. He had begged, borrowed, and saved every penny in order to afford the bus ticket, and had spent the 14 hours between country and city looking forward to being treated as something other than a disease or aberration.
Please take a seat. Dr. Klein will be available soon.
The nurse told him as she pointed to the row of chairs set against the wall.
It shouldn't be more than 15 minutes.
Sam set aside the dog-eared Sports Illustrated that covered the chair, set furthest into the corner, and claimed it as his own. 15 minutes came and passed. A half hour. Sam was beginning to worry if he was going to see the doctor at all.
Hi.
He mumbled to the nurse.
I was just wondering how long Dr. Klein would be.
Her response was a glower and a terse.
Soon.
Okay if I use the bathroom?
He asked. She handed him a key, pointed down the hallway, and grunted. Sam shuffled past the brightly colored pamphlets and posters to the end of the hallway and found two doors, one labeled male and one female. He inserted the key and tried to turn the lock, but it refused to budge. He was about to return to the nurse's desk and ask for a working key, but before he took his first step, his hands became cold and clammy and his vision seemed to darken.
Not here.
He thought.
They wouldn't have done this here, would they?
Sam put the key in the door marked female and tried the lock. It turned, and his spirits fell. Sam didn't have to go to the bathroom anymore. He returned the key, went back to his corner of the waiting room, and tried to lose himself in an inane story about a soccer-playing dog. It didn't work.
The doctor will see you now.
Almost an hour later, and he had finally heard the words he had been waiting so long for. Sam sprang out of the chair so quickly that a couple of magazines spilled onto the floor. Under the withering stare of the nurse, he replaced them onto their perch. She led him into a sterile-looking room and asked him to take a seat. His body was electric with anticipation. He told himself that the bathroom key had just been a mistake. The nurse had probably just been having an off day and mixed up the keys. Nothing else mattered except that he was exactly where he needed to be. This was where it could all turn around. This was when someone would finally see him for who he knew he was. This doctor would understand. The door opened, and Dr. Klein stepped into the room.
Now, before we begin, I want to reassure you that we can help you. We've met people like you and helped them. You are not alone. Your illness is just a disorder, and like thousands of others, it can be treated. At least you're not one of the ones that wants to amputate limbs or be a cat or something. This won't be hard. Now tell me, Sam, why do you think you're a boy?
Clarice felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned around and saw her guide.
Come with me, Clarice. You have more to see.
But wait, why were they being so mean to her? They kept saying she or he or whatever was bad and wrong and stuff.
Not she or whatever, Clarice. He.
I guess.
There's more, Clarice. Come with me.
Why is that man dressed like a woman?
Clarice asked the fairy.
Clarice, that person is not a man. She is a woman. She has felt like a woman trapped in a man's body her whole life. Let's listen to what she has to say.
What do you mean my health insurance doesn't cover transitional surgery?
Tracy asked the doctor's receptionist.
I pay hundreds of dollars every year for health insurance so that down the road, when my health is in danger, I can get the health services that my body requires.
The woman behind the counter looked uncomfortable.
I'm sorry, sir. Miss. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that the Medicaid program, which you're on, does not cover gender reassignment therapy. And if I may say so, I don't think that your physical health is actually threatened by not having the surgery. I'm sorry, miss. We just can't help you today.
Tracy bowed her head, her face red from frustration, and turned abruptly around and stormed out of the doctor's office on the verge of tears. Later that day, she called her good friend Sandra, who was also a trans woman. She'd helped Tracy get through a lot of hard times when she felt like the whole world was against her. Sandra answered the phone.
Hi, sweetie. How are you?
Hi, Sandra. I'm okay. I just got back from the doctor's office to inquire about getting some surgery done. You know, how I've been thinking of getting top surgery. And maybe some plastic surgery for my face. I want one like yours, with big round cheeks. I just want to be beautiful like you.
Her speech trailed off, followed by sniffles that Sandra could hear. And finally, after a long sigh, Sandra broke in.
They told you your insurance wouldn't cover it, didn't they?
Sandra could make out a muffled
Yes.
in response.
Sweetie, you can look beautiful. Do you remember that doctor I told you about that gives me surgery? Well, you can go see her and tell her that I sent you. Of course, she isn't a real doctor. She's a pumper. But I've been going to her for years and I have no complaints. She'll treat you real good and make you pretty in no time.
A pumper? Isn't that illegal?
Look at it this way. Shouldn't it be illegal for doctors to deny you your basic right to be a healthy, happy woman? Listen, I have to run, but depending on the treatment, she charges $400 to $1,000 per injection. Everything will be fine. Go to her, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. You always know how to make me feel better.
Bye, sweetie.
Wait, what happened to that poor woman?
Clarice asked, her very transparent.
It's a terribly sad story, Clarice.
But I want to know. I understand how she feels. She deserves to have her body fixed so that she can feel better. It's like when I broke my arm. I got treatment to get it fixed to make me feel normal again. Did that pumper lady help her?
Yes, the pumper helped her, but you have to understand that these procedures are very dangerous. After she received a couple treatments, her body started reacting to the injections, and she developed a very serious infection. Many people receive treatment like this from pumpers because they have no other options, and there are cases when these treatments are fatal for them. That's enough for now, Clarice. I have more to show you.
A figure wandered down the darkened street. The figure looked in a dumpster for some food. The figure was Jade, assigned male at birth, and referred to as Jacob by her parents. Jade had been living on the streets for a few months after being kicked out of the house. Her parents weren't supportive of her transition, taking hormones and dressing in a more feminine manner. After a year of arguments and verbal abuse, her mom decided that it wasn't working. She kicked Jade out. Overnight, the locks were changed. Things had spiraled quickly after that. Without a place to sleep, she stopped going to school. She met some people and train hopped with them, finding solace in a hot meal, friendship, and drugs. Jade saw a police car. She quickly shuffled the other direction and put her hood up, hoping to remain unnoticed. Her plan failed. The car turned around and pulled up next to her. An officer got out.
What are you up to tonight, son?
The officer inquired. Jade froze. She hadn't interacted with the police much, but her interactions hadn't been positive, and she'd heard horror stories about what happened to street kids like herself.
Come here.
Jade complied.
Let me see what you've got in your bag.
The officer grabbed for her backpack. She pulled back. The cop took a few steps forward and tried again, and out of pure instinct, she tried to push him. Everything happened fast. She found herself on the ground, cold concrete to the face, mixed with a metallic taste in her mouth. Cuffs on her wrist, knee on her back, blurs of flashing lights, and voices of the men who had hurt her.
Resisting arrest, attempted assault on a police officer.
At the station, she was searched by a man. Jade felt cold and uncomfortable as she tried to tell him she wanted a woman to do the search, and that she couldn't be in a cell with men. Tears filled her eyes, and her voice grew desperate as images flashed through her mind of what might happen if she were put in the wrong cell. She also asked for hormone supplements, which had been confiscated with her backpack. She feared what would happen if she were to go cold turkey. The cops ignored her, pointing to the glaring M on her record. She protested and struggled and said it would be unsafe for her to be in a cell with men. So instead of the communal women's housing, she was taken to solitary confinement. They labeled her as a security threat since she had physically resisted officers and been uncooperative. She would spend 24 hours a day in the cell with no books or anything to do. Just a few feet of toilet paper, a thick sleeping pad for a blanket, and a video camera in the upper corner of the cell. She also was not given the hormones that she'd been taking. The jail didn't see it as a medical need, causing her to enter a state of deep depression. Clouds filled the cell and Clarice regained a sense of where she was. Her face burned and she felt sick to her stomach.
But she didn't do anything wrong. None of these horrible things were their fault. Why does this happen?
The realities of people living on the street and with different identities aren't the same as yours. People like Sam, Tracy, and Jade face a lot of discrimination by peers, doctors, parents, the police, and everyone in between. By being transgender, people face many more challenges. It's difficult to get medical care, find a job, even just survive. There are everyday annoyances and obstacles, but also implications of much more dire circumstances. I have one last thing to show you.
Clarice was suddenly transported back to the day before at school. She witnessed again the conversation between her and Taylor, but this time she experienced a different perspective. She looked more carefully at the two of them talking, and this time she saw the pain that her words had inflicted on Taylor. The next day at school, Clarice saw Taylor in the hallway and approached her.
Hi, Taylor. How are you?
Taylor didn't walk away, but did not say anything.
Would you like to sit with me at lunch today?